Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Joe Emilio Show. I'm your host, Joe Emilio, and I am here with Richard Wilkinson, a very interesting man, knows a lot about federalism, but also had a very interesting tweet a few weeks back, and we're going to chat about that. But before we do, Richard, how are you doing?
I'm very well, thanks, Joe. It's thrilled to finally be on your show. I
And
know we tried to set it up when that tweet happened a few months ago, but I've been a bit tied up. But thanks very much for the invite. It's great to be here.
no worries. And thank you for coming on. I've seen you on, what's it called? Oh, how am I forgetting the name? The guy's gonna kill me.
Wow, I
David
wrote your name.
Ansara. David
Never saw.
Ansara. Sorry, David, if you ever watch this. You were on David Ansara's podcast, Solutions podcast, which I encourage people to go watch, where you spoke a lot about federalism and autonomy and stuff like that. It's a very good episode. That's where I first heard of you. And then you popped up on my Twitter feed with a doozy of a tweet in a good way,
Okay.
which I will show everybody now. Just let me get this quickly. Let me get you
I
here.
hope I
And
put it still open. I often delete it and then reactivate it almost 2 or 3 times a week. But I think I'm currently active. I am active on Twitter, so you should be able to pull it up. Yeah.
well, yeah, I can see it, so you must be active. But yeah, so this was the tweet. I mean, look at that, 900 likes, 358 retweets, and 67 comments.
Yeah.
I mean, that did really, really well. And you were just commenting on so that people understand the context around this is Ernst Rutz had just landed in America a few months ago. I actually had Ernst Rutz 2 weeks ago on the show to chat about that visit. And he had just surprisingly told everybody. The woke Twitter just went absolutely insane. And then you had something to say about it. And for those of you who
Yeah.
want to check it out for yourself, there is a link to the tweet in the description below. You can go check it out and read the entire thing. We're not going to go through the entire thing. I just wanted
Cool.
to look at some of it. But before I do, I'm curious to know, because in the tweet you said that you weren't exactly sure why Ernest was there, or what made him go. Did you find out? Do you know now why?
Yeah, it seems like he was there to have an interview with Tucker Carlson
Yeah.
on Fox News. And strangely, the AfriForum guys can't even watch the whole episode because it's restricted to America or something.
Yes.
So so we can get these short little clips out of it. I haven't seen any of it.
Okay.
I, someone has a précis of what's going. I guess he's talking about South Africa in general. And the strange thing is, I think it aired one day before or after Natal completely blew up.
Mm. Nice.
I think it was one day before. So pretty good timing there. I think the world isn't really that interested in South Africa at the best of times. In my experiences, they're just not interested in this part of
Mm.
the world. But occasionally, every couple of years, they all sort of stop and pause and take a look at South Africa. What's going on there? It's a little bit like opening a door of your house that you never go into. Every time they do, they're like, "My God." Um, and that's kind of what Tucker Carlson was doing. He sort of checks in with South Africa once every 3 years. And it's quite interesting because a lot of the narratives that are going on here fit some of the stuff going on in America. So, different people from different sides of the political spectrum use South Africa as cannon fodder occasionally.
Mm.
Everyone from Ruth Bader Ginsburg through to Tucker Carlson. So, yeah.
Yeah. I think, no, I couldn't agree with you more. I would like, I think, well, let me say this. Ernst Rich was going over there to talk about farm murders and other
Okay.
things happening in South Africa. He also spoke about the riots and stuff like that. And yeah, apparently, if you go on his Facebook page, his not Afriform, I think it's Ernst Rutz's Facebook page, you can
Uh-huh.
see a lot more of the
Okay.
interview. So feel free to go check it out. But
Yeah.
regardless of how you feel of Ernst Rutz, I think as a synopsis to your tweet, you were basically saying, look, guys, what's wrong with someone going out on an international stage and talking about a serious topic? And you made parallels, examples like, oh, if it was Rhino, if it was GBV, we'd be praising him if those were the topics that he was going to the States to talk about. And so you started to talk about how the left journos are actually disappointing in a way because, all they're doing is trying to cancel the guy, which you can't really cancel Ernst, but they're definitely attempted to. And then you say something very interesting, which I wanted to pick your brain at, because I think the left really hate it when someone says this. I'm just trying to look. Yeah, here it is. So I'll pop it on the screen as well so people can follow here. So you actually say, fair to say South Africa has not worked out as middle-class left planned. Their heroes are disgraced. Their enemies and rivals have emerged triumphant. It's painful and humiliating to watch. Trust me, I know. I was a lefty who joined the ANC Youth League at 19 and loudly disparaged the DA. Oh, you got to tell us about that.
Well, that was 2006, wasn't it? And I mean, I'd just come out of school and I'd gone to UCT, and I don't know what else. I mean, I hadn't really gone through any kind of political development in my personal life. And I was at O Week at UCT when you sign up to a million institutions. I tried to sign up to the ANC, I think. Gave them like 70 Rand or something and never heard back from them, which is a pretty good red flag warning sign. And I turned up to some of their meetings and was really disturbed by it.
Oh, really?
And it's such an interesting time of my life because, I come from the suburbs of Johannesburg, from an English liberal background. I went to a private school, and I think, like many young people, at that age, you're probably quite, politically ambitious, but also deeply naive about how the world works, And shortly thereafter, Eskom collapsed. We had Polokwane. Both were pretty shocking events because it just completely changes your understanding of South Africa. It knocked me right backwards. It's just like, wow, have I completely misinterpreted everything about this country? Then we had the rise of Zilla. I was very impressed with her. I thought she was great. I very quickly went from being sort of like a soft lefty into being quite conservative. I sort of started discovering like Margaret Thatcher and sort of libertarian theory and Ayn Rand and so on. And what did it for me is I spent 5 years at UCT in the commerce, humanities and law faculties. And I did a course on race, class and gender in 2008, which was just mad. I mean, it was just pure communist theory. And I suddenly realized that actually, I'm not a lefty at all. And then I spent a good couple of years with Pierre de Vos in the UCT law faculty. At one point in 2011, I used to rock up to his lectures with a Helen Zille poster and a book of Margaret Thatcher quotations and just heckle him from the back row. So that's the sort of guy I was. I did a full 180. I went from being like a soft lefty in first year to being, and many of my university colleagues will vouch for this, but for being a pretty hardcore DA supporting sort of libertarian, and then that's pretty much where I've stayed ever since. I don't think my views have changed in 10 years, except they've got a little bit harder. So anyway, that's where I come from, and so I remember leaving UCT with a sort of real contempt for the South African left, if I can put it that way. I found a lot of their stuff was just dishonest. I mean, because I come from a pretty left-wing point of departure, and as I came into contact with reality, suddenly I realized this is bullshit. And it's probably bullshit everywhere in the world, but particularly in South Africa, and I just developed huge admiration for Helen Zille and Tony Leon, who both had the insight and the courage to understand South Africa, and then the courage to actually stand up against political correctness and against the tide of history. And they won Cape Town, won the Western Cape, and did a great job in government. And I actually went and worked for Helen Zille for a couple of months. And so that's where I came from. And I always sort of look back on my time at UCT, and I kept thinking to myself, how are these people still supporting the same failed ideologies after 20, 30 years of ANC governance? I mean, I moved. Why have they not moved? And then in 2015, we had fallism, and it just I was absolutely staggered that that all these left-wing Marxist sort of professors at UCT were still, cheering on their own destruction. And Fallism was great because it really exposed the South African left. They all went in for it. They all supported it. They all cheered it on. And then 6 months later, they had people burning down their offices, and Max Price is still, cheering them on. And so that brings me to my tweet, because I occasionally use Twitter as my therapist, where I vent about these sorts of things. And Nick Dawes, I think, was criticizing Ernst Roots, and I just said, what, the guy's entitled to speak on the public stage internationally. He's entitled to do that. Don't try and cancel the guy. I mean, if you want to disagree with him, but that's not how the left argues. They immediately try to cancel you through ad hominem attacks on your character and your political background. Okay, so Ernst Roots is Afrikaans, and he's a white Afrikaner complaining about things that affect farmers in South Africa. He's as entitled to a public platform as anybody else. And so I just got a bit tired with lefty journalists, really, and I went and tweeted that, and I was astonished to see that I wasn't the only person who felt that way. And I think that over the last 10 years, a lot of people have been on the same journey as me. We all started off trying to be quite sympathetic or pro sort of African nationalism or pro progressive ideas, and suddenly realized these ideas are counterproductive, and rapidly running out of patience with people who still try to peddle the snake oil of African nationalism and socialism, and who basically sneer at those people who have bravely and courageously and selflessly dedicated their careers to trying to save South Africa and trying to help people who deserve a lot more sympathy than they're getting.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree 100% with you on that one. I mean, I was also, I think, like maybe before the lockdown, I thought I was quite a lefty myself, Then I did a bit of research, and I'm like, I don't really like this one, or I don't really like this thought, or I don't like this kind of agenda that's going on. And I started to realize I'm actually, well, I mean, I don't know. I still consider myself a centrist leaning right, if there's such a thing, which some people have told me, oh, there's no such thing as a centrist. But I don't know. I definitely have left leaning, thoughts and ideas, and also at the same time have very right leaning thoughts and ideas. But anyway, something you mentioned while you were chatting with us is you said you did a bit of race theory, critical race theory.
Critical race theory really exploded the last 5 years. It was a bit after my time at UCT, although it wasn't called critical race theory. I did a course in race, class, and gender.
That was it.
In the UCT humanities faculty, which is basically a mixture of classical Marxism with identity politics, and I was really repulsed by it, and then there was the UCT law faculty, which was very focused on public law, and very focused on identity politics, and there's no doubts about it. A large part of South African legal academia and lawyers are very left oriented, So I went through that for a couple of years, and it, I'm deeply grateful to all of my professors because I didn't agree with them, but they certainly showed me, gave me a tour of ideology that helped crystallize who I am, which is the exact opposite of that. And the astonishing thing is, I left UCT thinking, this is really poisonous stuff. Thank goodness it's restricted to the law and humanities faculties of a couple of universities, and then with social media and wokeism and fallism, it just exploded, and it's taken over large parts of our entire society, not just in South Africa but across the Anglosphere. Yeah.
Do you think that, I don't know, like, okay, so social media seems to be quite potent with wokeism, especially Twitter, like Twitter and Facebook. The moment you say something that is out of line with what the wokies believe, they start researching in your tweets. or your timeline for some really, disgusting thing that you may have said when you were 9 years old or something, and
Exactly.
then try and, public public stone you, as it were.
Exactly.
Um, and do you think it's gone past? Because here's the thing, like I've recently, I've traveled South Africa and I've been speaking to your average South African. I mean, I was in
Mm.
Joburg over the weekend, and I was in the car with I was in an Uber, and I was bloody surprised and happy with
Mm.
the conversation I had with this Uber driver, because he was all about like, no, the ANC must fall and this racism is,
Yeah.
there's enough of it, blah blah. And he's an average South African, he's an Uber driver, and it gave me a bit of
Mm.
hope that not everyone is falling for this critical race theory wokey BS that the ANC is trying to drive down our throats. I mean, would you say that the public isn't falling for it, or do you worry about it?
I think both. I mean, I think that the overwhelming majority of people are not woke, but I think the wokes have marched their way through every institution that is worth marching their way through, including the English cricket side, every school you can possibly imagine. And there's normally a very small syndicate of wokes who work together to attack a particular institution, but that's all you need. You only need 6 or 7 of them, and they all pretend as though they're independent of each other, but they're actually in the same WhatsApp group. So what do I think? I think the Wokes have taken control of virtually all of South Africa's public institutions and a number of private institutions, and I think that they have replicated that in every English-speaking country in the world. I think that they are incredibly unpopular amongst the general population. I mean, at the moment, I'm busy researching South African private schools, and I'm potentially writing an article about it. I'm calling it School Capture, the Woke Assault on South Africa's Elite Schools. And I've spoken to a number of teachers, a number of parents and kids, and they can all see what's happening. And the stuff is incredibly unpopular, but they can't fight back against it because the South African media is very powerful, led by, Iqbal Survey and other loud voices like Eusebius McKayser and so on. These people are very woke, very good at playing this game. And they have destroyed many people before, and so everyone's scared and terrified. But that doesn't mean that wokeism is popular. It isn't. It's very unpopular, and including within Black South Africa. I mean, like wokeness is really just a pastime of the Black elite and the white elite, because many wokes are sort of white lefties. But if you go speak to working class people of any color, they just want jobs, they want security, they want government services that work, and they don't have time for this sort of self-indulgent bullshit. So that's why I think a guy like Trump is very popular. I think he's the anti-woke in America. I'm not a Trump fan myself, not at all. And I wish we had someone like Reagan who could ride the anti-woke wave. But I think that anti-wokeness is a very powerful sort of current, like a reverse current against wokeness. And in South Africa, I think that's very strong as well.
Hmm.
I think that's why so many podcasters are so a number of podcasters are so successful. People are checking out of 702 Radio, checking out of the Mail and Guardian, checking out of anything connected to Iqbal Survey or the SABC or the ENCA.
Hmm.
Would rather listen to your podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. And I
Yeah.
think, um, let me also say, you may not be a Trump supporter, but I am, and I have no problem with that.
Yeah.
At the beginning of last year, because I retweeted a few Trump tweets, I was, viciously attacked by even some
By
of
who?
my.
Robert and Bianca.
Oh, you name it, dude. You name it. Like, so basically, what happened, was I was still very careful with what I tweeted when it came to Trump and stuff, because he
Mm.
was still president and everybody was like, Trump deranged syndrome. But I mean, in my opinion, I definitely didn't agree with a lot of what he said. Don't get me wrong.
Mm.
Like, I hated a lot when he spoke, and sometimes he wasn't a politician. He's a businessman, and he trips up. But in my opinion, from what I've heard from my American friends, from what I saw, he did some good. And unfortunately, the media was very good
Mm.
at making him look bad. and creating this Trump deranged syndrome that the
Mm,
moment you just retweet something, I think
mm.
one of the things it was during the riots, and he said that he wanted to make what was that organization called a terrorist organization. Oh, I want to say Afri4, but it's not that. Um it's that red and black flag. That's their symbol.
Antifa.
Yes, Antifa. That's the one. Okay, so he wanted to make that a terrorist organization. I retweeted that because I kind of agreed with that. And then I got attacked left, right, and center, and someone attacked me as well, cost me my gig that I was at the time. I had a gig during the lockdown, like the harsh lockdown, right? So like as a comedian,
Yeah,
virtually impossible to find a gig.
yeah,
And they attacked me, and I lost my gig due to it. And
yeah.
yeah, it's that's just the craziness that some people had, and I was just like, you know what, like if you're not a Trump supporter, I really don't care because at the end of the day, whether you are or you aren't, you cannot judge someone by their political views. Like you
Yes.
support the DA, right? I'm not now gonna think that you're some weird racist person. That I don't know. Oh, the DA is a failure or whatever the case may be. Even if you're an EFF supporter, I would never do that.
Yeah.
I'd want to chat to you and find out why. I'd love to hear why, but I mean, I'm not gonna judge you on your political views. I think as human beings, we are far more complex with different views and opinions than a simple, oh well, you support X, Y, and Z, therefore you are X, Y, and Z, and that is the dangers of wokeism as well. They put you in a box, and it feels like there's no room for discussion. There's no
Yeah.
room for communication. If it's either you believe their way of life
Mm,
or you're exiled.
100%.
Yeah.
And it's yeah. Look, I mean, I like to think I'm pretty tolerant of most people, but there's no doubt in my mind that 99% of the intolerance is coming from the left today.
Yeah.
You know,
And
I mean, that's what drove.
ironically, they're
Yeah,
the ones that preach about tolerism.
exactly, exactly. And a lot of guys on the right who I disagree with, I find they like something like AfriForum. I'm not a member of AfriForum. I don't know Ernst Root. I haven't studied them. Um, if I did, I could probably find something I disagree with. But I've had some interactions with these guys. They're generally, in my experience, very polite, very professional, very respectful. They're not grossly dishonest about things. I find them to be very humble. They're just plowing their little field there, doing whatever they're doing, and they don't go out of their way to cause trouble for other people. They don't attack people who they disagree with. They kind of just like let everyone else live and do what they do. And they've slowly built up their membership base, which is what 300 or 400,000 people, and that seems to be their KPI. That's what they look at. They're like, oh, we added another 20,000 people this week. They're all donating $60 a month to us or whatever. And that's cool, And if I go and start an organization that focuses on environmental protection or Zulu nationalism, AfriForum isn't going to come and attack me for that. They'll just see you as a colleague, as a like another shop in the shopping center. Whereas the left is anti-competitive. It's like you will shop at our shop only,
Yeah.
otherwise we will come and attack you. There's no space in the shopping center for anyone selling anything else against us. And so I'd far rather hang out and have a beer with a bunch of guys who are not on the left than hang out with the sort of people I was hanging out with at university. And I spent quite a lot of time at university, who I found were just really quite scary to hang out with, because if I mention anything to them that is any way controversial, if I dissent from their worldview, it's really hostile. I mean, like I did this in my law faculty classes at UCT, and for the first time in my life, I felt afraid, like of before cancellation was a term, before wokeness was a term. This is like 2009, 2010. Um, you suddenly felt the hostility of the left, and it stuck with me, and it really pissed me off. And I admire a lot of those British journalists who have been fighting the same fight in the UK. The guys who write for the Spectator magazine, Toby Young and Fraser Nelson, and so on. And I found that a bit like COVID, the first wave of wokeness hit South Africa before it hit the UK, but then it hit the UK just as hard as it hit South Africa. And it's been really interesting to see guys on the right pushing back against it. I find that the right is not as ruthless as the left for the reasons you've just discussed, and I've often wondered about that. I've wondered whether we should be more ruthless, or whether if we do become like that, we're going to end up debasing ourselves in the same way that the left has done to themselves. And I think I've settled on the perspective that we need to fight our corner, but we must not be unethical, and we mustn't try and do what the left does.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you there because I also had with what happened to me, I've now
Mm.
taken the lawyer route. Like I'm suing for defamation,
Mm.
and it's not a secret. If people want to help me with my law fight or my legal fees, you can check out my website. All the details are there. I made a video. I did everything. I'm still in the still.
Sorry to interrupt, but Toby Young set up a thing in the UK called the Free Speech Union,
Mm,
which before he set it up, I wanted to set it up in South Africa,
mm,
which is basically like a pro bono. You become a member of the organization for $50 a month,
mm-hmm.
and then we use those fees to fight for people who've been cancelled. So someone like you, wrongful dismissal, defamation, get some lawyers together. I'll do it for free, and sue these guys and win, and take the proceeds and keep funding the organization.
Look, I think it's a brilliant idea because I can tell you, Richard. I know of a few people that have been wrongly after me, that have been wrongfully
Mm.
dismissed from their work and also defamed, because again, these lefties that we see on Twitter, you mentioned two of them. They're ruthless, and luckily for me, I do have a good support base, and they are helping me. But it's tough. It's still ongoing. But what I wanted to say is, to your point of how the right should fight back is, I often thought like, some people told me, oh, but why don't you cancel that person back? They dished it at you, you dish it back, and I've often said this even on Twitter. The moment the right starts behaving like the left, we've lost the fight.
Mm.
And we have to find
Luckily for me, I have.
other ways of fighting back that are, I don't want to say polite, but just almost like the high road. We can't. I don't think we can afford to fight on their grounds, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I saw all of the stuff happening um, in like 2010. I was there in UCT long before fallism, but I saw fallism in the classroom.
Mm. Mm.
Sort of racial essentialism and critical race there. They made us study Derrida and Foucault, who were the original French philosophers in the 1960s who came up with deconstructionism as an ideology. And I remember reading Foucault and Derrida and just thinking, this is bullshit. Passed the exam. What Derrida is so hard to understand because he sort of wraps the whole essence of what he's saying. He sort of wraps it in an obscurantist verbiage. You can't understand what the guy's saying. I remember sort of having to memorize some lines which I just write in the exam. So one of them was the multi-layered polycentricity of vernacular social organization. Which is just another way of saying that we reject objectivity. We reject the basis of Western civilization, which is classical liberalism, property rights, freedom of speech, in favor of multi-layered polycentricity of vernacular social organization, which basically means socialism. These guys were Marxists who were disillusioned with the state of Marxism in the 1960s because Stalin had had been such a monstrous disaster in the Soviet Union that communism was discredited. And I think Margaret Thatcher was the person who said that these guys keep coming up with new phrases to describe the same old ideology because the names get discredited so quickly that they move on and repackage it. So fallism is just Marxism reheated for the 21st century. If they got up there and said we're the Communist Party of Cape Town, they wouldn't win any votes. But fallism suddenly works, and if you can wrap it in identity politics, especially in a country as wounded and as vulnerable as South Africa, then it spreads like wildfire. They understood that. They got it to work. Well done to them. And the question is, how does the right fight back? And I agree with you. There are rules of engagement here, and we have to. I find that the best approach is to sunlight. Sunlight's the best disinfectant. Just put all the facts on the table, which the left doesn't like. Just put all the facts on the table, and the world will see through them. And then you have to compete in elections. You have to stand at your school governing board committee, and you have to stand for the UCT council, and you have to win votes. And it can be done. It's not being done to the extent that I would like in South Africa. And I have to put my hand up and say that I have been a selfish coward for many years because I've done what everybody else has done. I've run the calculus myself and decided from my personal perspective, my personal professional career, it's better just to keep my mouth shut and take the path of least resistance. But in the last couple of years, I've sensed a big fight back from the podcast guys, you, Ramon, and Ernst, Conscious Caracal, and so on. And look how successful you guys have been. I mean, look how many people tune into your stuff compared to read Iqbal's newspapers. I mean, it's not comparable.
Yeah. Thank you for the lovely compliment. And speaking of Conscious Caracal, you'll be on his show, I believe, tomorrow night, correct?
That's the plan. The plan. Yeah. Sorry, I've had to push everyone out by a couple of weeks because of my studying, which has been
no worries.
Been pretty weird. Yeah.
No, but that's important, and anybody who's watching this now, go over to Conscious Caracal and catch 7 p.m. tomorrow. Richard will be talking about federalism, which is something we are going to talk about in a moment here. But just to comment on what you said, I think, like you said, it's very important that the right fight in a constructive way. I think that's the most. Yeah, that I 100% agree with you on that. And I wanted to ask you one more question on wokeism and all that. Have you read, because you said you worked for, so I imagine the answer to this is yes. Have you read Helen's book?
Wait 1 minute.
For those of you just tuning in, I am sitting here with Richard Wilkinson, a man who is very interesting, knows federalism quite well. He's a lawyer and currently in studies as well. And he had a very interesting tweet, which is linked in the description below. Please go check it out. It spoke a lot of truth, and I don't think a lot of people were happy with him. Of course. Okay, but is it signed?
Is it signed? Her other book was signed. This one is not signed. So Helen, if you're watching, I'm going to come and ask for you for a signature. It's very good. It's very good. I wanted to write a book, the same book, back in 2015. I didn't do it. I was going to call it Roads Must Fall.
Nice.
Where you basically just, because I know these guys. I was a Mandela Rhodes Scholar. I used to hang out with a lot of the people who went on to be fallists, like Kotsi Chikane, Jessica Breakey, Sizwe Mpofu Walsh, and so on. And I just sort of looked at these people, these most pretentious, hypocritical narcissists who were deeply selfish and destructive. And I felt that nobody was exposing that hypocrisy. And if I had my time again, I would have quit my job and gone and done it. No doubt about it. And so I'm coming out of my shell a bit more now. Maybe I'm not employed at a corporate, and so I feel a little bit freer, more free.
That will do.
But I'm very interested in that of being sort of anti-fragile and being independent, which I think is what you are. You don't report to an HR department.
No. I never really have. I did comedy full time up until the lockdown. So I've always been sort of independent, but I had clients, and I still answered to those clients,
Okay,
and
interesting.
it was yeah. So there was obviously some things I could not say, and I had to be careful of how outspoken I was.
Yeah.
But the moment I was let go, I was like, well, now there's nothing stopping me, and I want to be my own person. I also wanted to start up a YouTube channel again. I had one, and then I stopped it, and then I was like, well, the lockdown's perfect opportunity for it, and I'm very grateful for it because it's kept me in a way performing and being creative, which
Mm.
as a comedian I need to be creative as possible. But anyway, yeah, no, it's going back to Helen's book. I read it as well. I finished it
Yeah.
a few weeks ago. Uh, I think she touched on a lot of important things, especially towards the end, about how you deal with some of these woke individuals, especially on social media. Um, I have advice for everybody that's listening when you deal with, and you'll be able to spot them. They're the
Yeah.
ones that are relentless. They have to comment on everything. They start, and the moment they start insulting you, just block,
Yeah.
just block. I
Yeah.
have that, and my Twitter is so much more relaxed now.
Also, they've often got blue hair and and pronouns in their bio,
Yes.
but often it's because it's very competitive to be who can be more woke, and so it started off with like he, him, or she, her, and now it's like he, they. The plural has been used as like a form I don't know. But I once saw someone speak about je and je, which is
Oh no,
XHE and XHER.
what is that?
If you ever see someone with XHE in their pronoun, Gmail, run for the hills.
What does it mean though? Like, what is it? What do you even know?
Uh,
Because like I've seen
the
like
whole point. The whole point.
okay.
If it's not, you don't understand what you're doing. You're too scared to do or say anything, and so it's all part of the sort of cultural jujitsu sort of thing of claiming victimhood and then turning that into moral superiority, and then sort of baffling everyone with bullshit. So nobody really knows what they can or can't say because I don't want to offend the Gmail. And next thing you know, you have got yourself into a position where you've taken sort of control of the direction of whatever organization you're targeting, and they don't look back from that point.
Mm. No,
Um,
I think
so it's not hard to spot a work.
yeah,
Go to
like
UCPS; they're all over the place.
I've
But are
seen.
they still? Because they're so discredited now and they're so loathed. And,
I think most of the world makes fun of them now.
yeah,
I think we're so blown away by the mental gymnastics these people do to explain their ideology or their theories or whatever, what have you.
mm,
Um, I mean, for example, gender fluid. I mean, one day I feel like a man, the next day I feel like a woman.
yeah,
So I mean, your bio should then be he, she, him, they, her, jiu-jitsu, I don't know, Z, A, B, C, D, I don't
mm,
know. It's like every single, and again, and here's the thing. This is what's really messed up about this, Richard, is that, you have to say at some point, like, we're not homophobic or we're not LGBTQ
mm,
phobic or whatever the case is. It's just
absolutely
that
not.
some of these, like, if you want to dress up as a horse and you identify as a horse, because I've seen videos, um, then go ahead, do that on your weekend. No problem whatsoever. You can be whoever
Yeah,
it is you want to be, friend.
yeah.
But I mean, someone has to call
Look,
you out on the
it's all
craziness.
about the weaponization of identity. I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, today it'll be gender, tomorrow it'll be something else. Um, it's because I mean, I and the rest of the world not interested in anyone's identity. I mean, eventually, what you'll move on to is the month of the year that you're born in. I was born in October, therefore I'm a victim. Um, and we're going to set up the October National Congress and so on. And
October
I just
lives
I
matter.
regret
October lives matter.
October Lives Matter. Yeah, um, the left has figured out that identity is the way into mobilizing people, and they figured that out, and they're successful.
Yeah. Yeah.
They used to use class in the early 20th century. They used class, and now they use identity.
Mm.
And I mourn the death of liberalism in the Anglosphere. Uh, I don't know what more to say other than I regret these guys finding ways to weaponize identity.
Absolutely.
Uh,
Well, I
it
think
makes me very sad.
it does, and I hope that look, it's good to know that we both believe that wokeism is a rejected concept, but
Mm,
unfortunately the elites and the people in charge kind of have control, and hopefully, the masses or the people that don't subscribe to this way of thinking will fight back and be encouraged to fight back and not be afraid
mm,
to just have an opinion again and have that social discourse. I think you're right. Like a lot of people that are saying, I identify as this and that, and these liberals, these hectic wokies that go out with their pink hair or their blue hair, and they're on TikTok saying all this crazy stuff about, this is what this means and this is what that means. No one's saying, hold on, let's have a discussion. What's the problem here or what it could be the problem when you start saying these things? There's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of, like, okay, so you identify as a man now. Like, for example, in America, there's that transgender guy or woman, sorry, I don't know what the correct term
mm,
is, that is in office. He identifies as a woman, but he is a man. But
mm,
the feminists spent years going against, like, I don't know, men being in power because they want to be treated equal. But yet this
mm,
guy is a man, but he identifies as a woman, so it's okay. It
mm.
becomes very confusing when you start talking about all these terms, and I think there should be more public debates about these terms and the way these ideas are shared. And again, to your point,
Yeah.
I hope that
Look,
more
I
people will
just,
talk about it.
um, I, I was interested in public policy. My early research was about housing,
Mm.
and I think that we've got some really bad housing laws in South Africa, and I think that the idea that government should try and build houses everywhere is not feasible. It's very expensive to build a house for somebody. So I think we should be handing out rental housing vouchers to people,
Oh yeah,
um, and we should do the same in education and so on. And, I miss the days where people used to debate public policy because now we're debating identity the whole time.
mm-hmm.
My personal view is I'm a civil liberties guy. I'm a classical liberal. So I strongly support gay rights. I strongly support um, in any kind of civil rights. I strongly uh, support civil rights, and I also support people being kind and respectful to other people. That's not something you can enforce through law, but it's something that I appreciate when people are kind to other people, who empathize with other people, who are inclusive of other people. That's what I believe in. That's what I support.
Yeah,
But the problem is that when the left weaponizes this stuff, they are looking for harm in situations where often there isn't any harm. There is plenty of harm out there in the world. I mean, I don't see many blue-haired wokies walking into Kabul to lecture the Taliban about women's rights, but they will go to UCT where
yeah,
everyone is pretty left-wing and progressive to begin with, and shout at people about women's rights.
yeah,
Um, and so what they're doing is they're just poisoning the water.
mm,
It's like, and that's part of that's not just a ancillary outcome. That is their objective, is to try and poison the water. And so you end up in a situation where nobody wants to talk about housing reform or healthcare or anything because we're too busy fighting each other over identity.
mm,
Like that's where I eventually got to, and obviously they will try and interpret your stance as being, you know, racist or sexist or patriarchal or whatever, but it isn't. It's just like we're tired of the Marxists weaponizing identity.
absolutely. And I mean, you hit the nail on the head there, because we're seeing this happen in South Africa at the moment. ANC will have you believe racism is the biggest problem in South Africa. Meanwhile, actually, unemployment is the biggest problem in South Africa.
Mm.
That's how the public feels, and it's because of
Absolutely.
labor laws and policies that and other factors and things that the ANC has implemented that has just created more poverty. And they've been in power for 27 years. And again, to your point, that they use the identity politics to mask the actual problems that exist. Um,
Look, I mean, South Africa's had a major impact on my development. I mean, I grew up in South Africa, started off as a lefty. If I were Dutch or something, I'd probably still be a lefty,
hmm,
because it's kind of like the left certainly enjoys the comforts of capitalism from which to launch their left wing projects, and it's only when you've lost the stuff that capitalism creates that you really start to appreciate capitalism and
yeah.
classical liberalism. Um, so South Africa's made me a classical liberal, or what some people might call a conservative, or whatever the terminology is. But if I were overseas, I probably wouldn't be um, as contemptuous as I am towards many left wing projects.
Hey, same here. Maybe, I don't know, but we are where we are today because of where we live and the
Sure.
environment around us. Okay, so speaking about the environment around us, very quickly, because we're running out of time.
Hmm. Hmm.
Federalism. I hear that you are a very outspoken individual about federalism. That you like it, you
Yeah.
love it. So I'm gonna get right to the chase. I had yesterday on my channel Phil Craig. I don't know if you're aware of
Hmm.
Phil Craig. He's
Yeah,
the
no, Paul. Yeah, yeah.
Phil from the Cape Independence Advocacy Group. I always struggle with that one. It's a
Cool.
bit of a mouthful.
Hmm.
And new polling. Have you seen the new polling from the
I had a quick
CIAG?
look at it. Yeah, they've
Yeah,
gone up 6 points, 10 points or so.
yeah.
Yeah.
So how do you feel about that? How do you feel about Western Cape secession, or do you think federalism is a better way to go?
So I spent about 2 years of my life researching provincial legislative powers in South Africa, and I worked in the Western Cape government for 6 months. Bumped into Helen Zille on the side of Wales Street one day and said, "Can I send you my thesis?" So I sent her my thesis. Next thing, I was working in the Western Cape government. That stuff didn't really go that far because I don't think there's enough. Certainly back in 2012, I don't think there was enough uh, support for it within the provincial government to really push provincial legislative boundaries very far. And they had their hands full doing all sorts of other things. Then we had Fallism in 2015, and then we've had Zuma and state capture, and then we had Ramaphoria, and now we are where we are, which is Ramaphoria having collapsed, and South Africa rapidly now disintegrating in many respects. And so the Cape Independence guys have been around since 2008. I knew Jack Miller, still know Jack Miller, who started the Cape Party and never really won a seat, didn't win enough votes for that. And then along comes Paul Craig and the Cape Independence Advocacy Group, as well as Cape Exit and some other groups. I haven't been involved, but gee, the last year or two they've taken off. So what do I think about it? I'm not involved at all in those initiatives, but I'm just watching them, and it's interesting. I mean, what hasn't happened is they haven't been able to convert online support into votes at the ballot box, which really is what counts. I think this election will be the first one where they might actually kick off with it. But the Cape Party is a party that's separate to Phil Craig's outfit.
Yeah,
The Cape Party, I find, is not really that public or that active. I mean, people know what Phil Craig's up to, but what's the Cape Party doing? From what I sense, I'm not an expert in politics, far from it, and I'm not the sort of guy who knows how to win votes. But um, I sense they need a leader, and they need funding, and they need some traction. And I don't think they've got any of that right now. But it's obvious that it's an idea which people probably will turn to if South Africa continues to disintegrate.
mm,
Um,
yeah, that would be
uh,
true. I think. Look, I think the Cape advocacy group, they're lobbyists. They put pressure on the politicians. That's basically what they do. They're not a political
Yeah.
party. You can't vote for them. But I think for them, it's about getting the referendum. That's that right now is their main focus, is getting that referendum, so that people, and when the time is right, people can vote for if they want Western Cape to secede, and then we take it from there. But yeah, so it sounds like you're kind of like, you know what, if people want it, let it happen. Could you put yourself in that kind of like boat, so to speak?
Yeah, I live in Johannesburg. um, yeah, I'm not politically active at the moment.
No, but I guess
And
I guess what my question is like, you said earlier, you support anybody who wants to be what they want to be. If they want to, you support
mm,
gay rights, you support this right, that right.
mm,
So if the Western Cape wants to secede, I would imagine
mm,
that you would be like, you know what, if they want it, let it happen.
yeah. No,
Yeah.
look, I support any initiative that supports, that furthers classical liberalism. I mean, it all depends what sort of country this would be. I
Mm.
wouldn't be a fan of a Cape Republic that becomes either a fork state or a socialist state. Um, and I have no idea what the Cape Republic would be if it were to be independent. Uh, because we just don't. South Africa's just so underdeveloped ideologically and politically. I mean, you've got the ANC, which is just a corrupt mafia. But I mean, I just don't know what people are proposing from like ideologically and politically. Uh, so before I sign up to support something, I need to know: are you guys trying to be classically liberal about it, or
Mm.
what exactly are you trying to do? Um, but I mean, ultimately, my thoughts on this is that Cape independence is an idea that will go nowhere um, on its own, and it has gone nowhere in the last 15 years.
Mm.
The guys have been working on it full time for 15 years. They've never won more than a few thousand votes.
Mm.
Uh, but if South Africa becomes a failed state, then Cape independence suddenly becomes very irrelevant. You know, and it's a bit like the lifeboats on the Titanic. Nobody wants to get into the lifeboats until the ship's at 45 degrees and everybody suddenly wants to get into the lifeboats. And
Yeah.
so I sort of feel that the pace of Cape independence will be dictated by the pace of South Africa's collapse.
Interesting.
That's how I've always felt, and the reason that it's taken off recently is because South Africa is now probably 30 degrees in the water.
Yeah.
Um, Worse than that. I mean, the situation in South Africa is so bad. I mean, you've got what's coming down the pipeline is EWC, NHI, the Department of Social Development today put out a green paper or something where they said we want to take 12% of your income,
Yeah.
put it into like a national pension fund or some garbage. Um, but South Africa still hangs together because the petrol stations still have petrol and the supermarkets still have food. It's not a full-blown failed state yet. When it becomes a full-blown failed state, you will have evacuation of a lot of people out of this country, but not everybody. And there are going to be a lot of people who won't be able to leave, but who will be desperate because they'll be hungry. And in those circumstances, everything changes. I mean, the people talking about Section 215 of the Constitution. South Africa will be a lawless country. It'll be a country where the rule of law doesn't really work, and it'll be a bit like what happened in KZN a few weeks ago.
Mm.
And in those circumstances, I find it very hard to see how Cape independence can possibly be stopped. People always say it's impossible. Well, it's impossible until it suddenly becomes impossible to stop. It's one of those strange things in life where the Titanic was impossible to sink until suddenly it became impossible to keep it afloat. And it happened in the space of 2.5 hours. So I don't underestimate Cape independence at all, not at all.
Mm.
Um, and my first priority would be for South Africa to be a great success. There are only one of two ways in which that could happen. The first is that the ANC starts governing the country well. It's not going to happen. And the second is the DA wins the national election and then governs the country well. And they could govern the country well, but I haven't seen firm evidence indicating that the DA is going to suddenly start winning 4 or 5 million more black votes. I think that's wishful thinking. And so what happens? Well, what happens is South Africa continues to drift as it has drifted for many years now. And eventually, at some point, South Africa will become a failed state if it continues on this current path. At which point you've got evacuation and you've got independence. Those are the two ways forward. I think both will happen. I think there'll be a lot of people who evacuate, but the people who can't evacuate, I think, are going to be pushed into a more and more desperate position. And at that point, I think things become very fluid. And I'm not convinced by many of the arguments that say that Cape independence can't happen. When the supermarkets run out of food and the petrol stations run out of petrol, and your president is, I don't know, David Mabuza or Malema or something, and you've got a KwaZulu-Natal style situation happening everywhere. Oh, there's all of a sudden things which were previously thought of as being impossible are going to become very, very possible very quickly.
Yeah.
At which point, people need to contribute to make sure that it's a modern, successful, liberal country. But because there's no guarantee about what it would be. And it's important that, after having screwed up in 1948 and having screwed up in the current regime, you don't want to make the same mistakes a third time. So those are my views. But I'm just some dude talking into a webcam. My views are not important. What matters is these guys need to win votes at the ballot box, and I'm not involved in that.
Yeah.
And we'll have to wait and see if they can. Yeah. I haven't seen someone come along yet who looks like a Jan Smuts style figure or Helen Zille style figure who's got the credibility to take votes off a very strong brand, which is the DA. And, those Cape Townians want DA local government, and they seem to think, if we vote for someone else, it'll let the ANC in. It's not how proportional representation works. But the DA and the ANC are very strong brands, and the EFF, it's a strong brand. And I haven't seen a Cape brand come along yet. Don't know why.
Fair point. An interesting analysis on what could happen. I think Ramon Kabanek would also tend to agree with you, and some other people as well. I'm waiting for that referendum to happen, and I will give my vote.
Yeah.
And
Look,
we'll see what happens.
I wrote a thing about referendums the other week, and I went on Chris and Sarah's show to talk about it. Because that is something, the referendum that they're trying to get, and which was coming down the tracks, is on the police, the trains, and ESCON. They wanted the Western Cape Police Service, and they want, I proposed this back in 2010. I wrote emails to Helen Zille on this in 2010, and it got rejected by the 2010 DA because they didn't want to stir the pot too much. Now they're signing up to it, And so clearly there's been a shift towards greater autonomy for the Western Cape. And if you ask the people of the Western Cape, do you want a police service run by the Western Cape government? 70% will vote yes.
Yep.
Or more, 80, 85. You'll find a lot of people in Khayelitsha are fed up with the police. They would rather have the provincial government run it. And you can see that referendum, they've got some hoops to jump through for legal reasons, which we can discuss if you want. But basically, they need the National Parliament to agree to pass legislation, which the Constitution says the Western Cape is entitled to. So, you've got a bit of work to be done there. But if that referendum ever comes along, it's a one-way victory for the Federalists. And regardless of what you think about independence or South Africa, I'm very excited about that. I strongly support federalism. I think the more that individual provinces are given control of stuff, the better. So I support full federalism for the Western Cape. I have for 10 years, and I wrote a whole thesis on it. So, let's hope that happens sooner rather than later.
Look, I think federalism in South Africa would also be a good thing. I think maybe I don't see that being a bad thing. I just question, regardless whether it goes with secession or federalism, my fear, regardless, is that the damage by the ANC is so bad that it's going to take, I don't know, 10, 20 years before we see true growth again. And
no, look, I agree with that. Even if you put the DA into government now, the damage done, something like education, SADTU is so deeply entrenched in all of these schools that I don't think you can fix the education department. I think you just got to move people into online education and hope for the best. KZN has been burnt to the ground. the police have. I mean, the institutional damage done is just enormous,
Yeah.
and that's another reason why the Cape Independence guys, um, probably have an argument that would appeal to a lot of people, which is let's just start again. And even if there's a bit of disruption in the beginning, actually that disruption might be a good thing, because if we can rebuild the education department from the ground up, we can hopefully lock SADTU out of this place.
Yeah.
Um, and so federalism. I mean, if you put the DA in charge of the Western Cape Police Service, gee man, you'd have to start with recruitment. You'd have to start recruiting good 18-year-olds to join the police, training and recruitment, and weeding out the bad apples. And the DA has been doing this in the education department, the health department. I mean, how much progress has the DA made in 14 years? They've stopped the rot. I think you can say that. They've stopped idiots like Claudi Motsoeneng or Ria Piecha or, Busi Mkhwebane being put in charge of important things. They've stopped that, but have they really improved things dramatically? It's very, very, any progress is very, very hard won. And this is because the DA takes quite a corporatist approach to governance, where they try and improve the systems. Whereas my personal view is you should just privatize, deregulate, and don't even try and fix things. I mean, if the DA took control of energy policy, I wouldn't spend my time trying to fix Eskom. I'd just let the grid open to the private sector and privatize Eskom, frankly. Sell off Kuberg and let some private company run Kuberg, And that's the thing, is that's my one criticism of the DA, is I don't think they're radical enough, or have been radical enough, when it comes to policy change. They almost try and be a better version of the ANC, whereas I would just want to privatize the whole of education in the Western Cape. And I think they are moving in that direction now. I think that they are rapidly, as things deteriorate, they're becoming more and more radical, which is exciting, because the DA is not just a blue version of the ANC. I think the DA increasingly is trying to turn itself into a pretty hardcore classical liberal party, and they're becoming more and more unapologetic about fighting for things like property rights. I mean, I saw them with AfriForum today, unapologetically taking on this stuff, unapologetically being against race-based policies as well. And that was not the case 5 years ago. So I think they're in good shape now.
No, I would tend to agree with that as well. It was exciting to see AfriForum and DA working together and stuff. I'm still also a bit hesitant with the DA. I'm hoping that I can get John Steenhuisen on the show, and I can really ask him a few tough questions. And really,
Please do that.
yeah. Well, can you get me in touch? I would love. Do you have some strings you can pull from your previous DA connections?
10 years ago. Chat to, who's John's guys? I don't know.
I don't know.
Come on.
Put a good word in with Helen Zilla. I mean, I've had her on the show before, but I think maybe if you just hey, Joe wants to speak to John, can we organize?
I've hardly chatted to her in years as well. I went underground. I was quite politically active, and then I deleted my Twitter account completely.
Okay.
And because I went to corporate, and I suddenly realized I wanted to sort of self-censor quite a lot and focus on my professional life. And so only in the last year that I've come out of my shell and started, fighting the wokies again on Twitter, which is probably a sign of madness on my part, but I've been inspired by guys like you who are out there running your podcast and contributing to public debate and whatever it is that you're talking about. I mean, people appreciate having that diversity of views out there, rather than having Eusebius argue with some other lefty about who can be more left wing. And I think we underestimate how big the market is for classical liberal content in South Africa, because
Absolutely.
just look at Equals newspapers, they've collapsed. Look at 702 Radio, they've collapsed. Nobody wants what they're offering.
Exactly.
They seem to think that they represent the masses. They don't. So I'm all in support of you keep doing what you're doing, man. You're doing great stuff.
Thanks, Richard. That really means a lot to me, and thank you for watching and supporting and the kind words. Before you go, we are out of time.
Sure.
Look, for those of you who might be watching, Richard has, like I said, done a full interview on David Ansara's podcast, Solutions with David Ansara, where he goes into detail about federalism. He's also going to be on Conscious Clerical tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. So please go check that out, talking again about federalism. I'm glad that I got to talk to you about some other topics. I think this was a very enlightening conversation. I really enjoyed it. And Richard,
I loved it.
I loved it too. And you're welcome back anytime. You just, WhatsApp me, whatever. Hey, Joe,
I've
I
got
want
some
to.
good content, and I might have towards the end of this year. I'm researching some disturbing stuff happening in the schools,
Okay, fantastic. I would love to chat to you about it.
involving wokeness in private schools, and I
Fantastic.
found some crazy stuff, man. So I'll be back in touch.
Please do, and send me the article when it's done. I'll happily read it, and we'll get you on, and we'll talk about it. That's very exciting stuff. But before you go, I want to share with you a comment that I saw from one of the fans on the show,
Yes,
Christu.
I know Richard Wilkinson. He wrote a book called The Spirit Level. Yeah. It's quite nice because when I went underground and I was trying to sort of make myself disappear, whenever you Google Richard Wilkinson, I don't come up because this crazy British lefty comes up where he keeps talking about how like inequality sort of makes everyone worse off and how we must all be communist. And it's quite nice because he doesn't look like me. He's like 150 years old. But it keeps me off the front page of Google, which is quite nice.
All right, cool. Um, so you are aware of that guy. And thank you,
Yeah.
Polly7Fire, for the 33 Rand super chats. Greatly appreciated. Guys, super chats always are appreciated, no matter how much it is, because it helps very much support the channel. Tomorrow, I will probably be on the ground. I'm going to be part of the protest for the gun amendment bill that the ANC wants
Yeah.
to do. We're protesting that. Protesting against it tomorrow at 12 p.m. So keep an eye out on this channel for some updates about that. Richard, is there anything you want to say before we sign off?
No, I just love your show and your viewers, and thanks for the kind comments there. I've also been following a couple of them, and hope to see you guys again at some point. And thank you
Fantastic.
like it would be nice if people contributed more to sort of alternative media, and I'm seeing these like Ramonda subscriptions. I see people can donate 33 rands to you or something. I strongly support that. These
Fantastic.
guys, we have to build alternative media. If it was viable, then I'd jump in the deep end myself and try and do it. But I fear that my podcasts would be watched by like 3 people.
Well,
I don't
look,
know.
it takes time. It takes time to build, but if you ever need help, I'm happy to help.
Thanks, man.
But also, if you're serious about that organization, or I don't know what the correct term is, that freedom of speech type of,
The Free Speech Union, yeah.
yeah, let's chat about it.
Yeah, I'm keen, man.
All right,
If, if,
cool.
if money were no object, there's some things that I'd want to do, and one of them is the Free Speech Union.
Well,
Um,
let's chat and see. Maybe we can get some people involved and get some help on that front and see what we can do. Yeah. Anyway, so ladies and gentlemen, thank you guys so much for watching. If you're new to this channel, please like and subscribe. All of that lovely stuff. I'll be back tomorrow evening for the late night chat with some comedians, and we're gonna have some fun times. Other than that, Richard, thank you once again for coming onto the show. It was an absolute pleasure chatting to you. I really enjoyed our conversation. Hang on the line for just a moment.
yeah.
Other than that, ladies and gentlemen, if I don't see you tomorrow night, stay safe, be kind to one another, and I'll see you at the next one. Cheers.